Hey guys, and welcome to my weekly wrap-up and currently reading video for this week. This is where I talk about the things that I read this past week and the things I plan on trying to pick up in the upcoming days, both physically and on audiobook. But first, before I do that, I have something I wanted to do real quick. So if you follow my wife, Giselle, and if you don't, what the heck is wrong with you? She's way cooler than me. She's freaking awesome, and she's already gotten through like 8 books this year, and I've only gotten through like 3, so she's crazy amazing, and if you're not already subscribed to her, I don't know what the heck you're doing with yourself, but she's doing a star jar this year, where she has this jar that is filled with stars, and each star is going to be a book that she read this year. So it's not quite filled with stars yet. There's 8 stars in there right now. There's going to be 1 for every single book that she reads this year. So she's hoping to have a nice jar full of stars by the end of the year. Now, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like making stars, but there's something else I wanted to do that I thought might be fun. She kind of has like the star jar in the background of her videos when she films. And so I wanted to put something in my background to kind of showcase how much I've read so far in the year. So I have these 2 slips of paper right here, and I'm going to do something with them real quick. There's one. Put it right here on the edge of my bookcase. Dang it, dropped the other one onto my desk. And number 2 right underneath it. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make a tally mark for every book I read this year. And you'll see in my 2017 Bookish Goals video, which should come out sometime this week, you'll see how many books I plan on trying to read this year. Unless you already follow me on Goodreads, then you've already seen how many I plan on reading this year. For every book I read, make a tally mark on this thing. So I've read 3 books this year so far. There we go. Oh, that's anticlimactic. That's just a blurry mess of nothing. Oh well, that's cool for me anyway. Once it starts to get filled up with black Sharpie, maybe it'll look a little bit more impressive as the year goes on. But you can just kind of keep an eye on that, and I'll make more tally marks as the year goes on, probably just like in these videos as I make them. So the first thing that I finished this week and the first thing that I finished this year was 9 Fox Gambit by Yoon-Ha Lee. This is a science fiction book that is a whole bag of crazy. There's a whole lot going on in this. Basically, it's about this woman named Cheris, and she, to kind of bring herself back from like a moment of disgrace, she offers to go and reclaim this fortress for her society that is called the Fortress of Scattered Needles. And in order to do this, she decides to take on this guy named Judeo. He was like this really successful, always successful tactician that never ever lost a battle and always knew what he was doing. But the trouble is that a long time ago he went crazy and caused the death of 2 armies, one being his own. She has to kind of like deal with him in a very interesting way that I won't necessarily describe. You can go ahead and read it for yourself. It's a very interesting dynamic between the 2 of them. It's not a typical kind of character relationship that you would usually see. And the society is just, it works in a very interesting way. They have this thing called a calendar. It's a calendar system that basically means they're all in a sort of alternate mindset where physics is different. The way that physics works, the way that science works, the way that math works is a little bit different, completely based on the entire society's mindset and how they all perceive the universe. It only works if every single person perceives the universe in this one specific way. And they have it's a very strict society, and it's a very interesting, sometimes very complex, difficult to understand. I'm not entirely sure if I just explained it correctly. It's kind of hard to wrap your brain around, and I'm not going to be so great at describing it here for you. All you got to know is that I did really enjoy it. I had a lot of fun reading it. I thought both the main characters, Cheris and Judeo, were really interesting and quite compelling characters, especially together. And you never know what Judeo is up to throughout the entire thing, because a lot of people believe that he's just gone crazy, and he doesn't quite know if he's gone crazy himself. So how the heck is Cheris supposed to know what he's up to? And the plot is sort of straightforward in what it's aiming to do and where it goes, but everything surrounding the plot is anything but straightforward. And it's not very long, and it's like I listened to this on audiobook, and the audiobook was good, and it's like only a 9-hour audiobook, and it goes by really quickly. Very much enjoyed it. The second book comes out later this year, and I'm definitely going to read that and talk to you more about it at that point. I may even try to re-listen to this first one, before I read that one, because I feel like there's so many things that I missed or just didn't comprehend the first time around that I may comprehend a little bit better the next time I read it. It's just one of those kinds of books where you really have to focus on what you're reading. The author really just expects you to kind of do the work yourself in trying to understand it. He doesn't spoon feed you anything, and it's really interesting, and I very highly suggest it if you're looking for a science fiction book like that. Now, I was going to move on to a different audiobook that I did eventually end up getting to, but then I realized I had forgotten that I had checked out Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein on Overdrive, and it was about to expire. So I was like, I gotta listen to this before it expires. I've never read anything by Robert Heinlein before, and I don't know exactly what compelled me to check this one out in particular. I put it on hold, and it came off of hold, and I didn't realize it had, and I just kind of had it sitting there for a while and then forgot to listen to it, and then I did listen to it, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I really enjoyed the setup. I enjoyed the beginning. I enjoyed like the first half quite a lot. It's basically about this man. Basically, it's a society that has like an alternate history to ours. It's really interesting because it's like the sci-fi world, but they still have film reels and stuff like that. But they were able to get to Mars, but they ended up having this child on Mars, ended up leaving this child on Mars, and there's Martians. There's actually a Martian race that exists on Mars, and they have a very specific way of existing, and the kid that is on Mars kind of grows up in their culture, and it's more than just their culture. That's their way of life is just so very different from ours, and their way of existing is so very different from ours. And then he comes back to Earth, and he is now the stranger in a strange land, and the strange land is Earth, and just Earth is kind of having to deal with him. He's kind of having to deal with Earth. At first, he's kind of like put into this hospital because his body's not used to Earth, and that's kind of like the reasoning they give for him being in the hospital. But he's kind of kept there, not necessarily against his will. He doesn't necessarily know why he's there. They're not really doing anything to him. He's just kind of hanging out there. But people want to let him out, and they basically feel like he's a prisoner there. And so it's this whole thing of this group of people trying to see what they can do for him and trying to get him out. And then stuff kind of escalates from there. And it kind of lost me about halfway through, a little bit after halfway through maybe, where it just kind of becomes this weird thing that's like entirely about like sex and religion. And it seems really preachy and kind of weird in a lot of places. And I wasn't quite sure what Robert Heinlein was going for a lot of the time. I mean, I do kind of understand what he was going for, but I just wasn't quite on board with any of it. Mostly just because a lot of it felt really out of place for the way the book was originally set up. I feel like it wasn't quite the book that I thought I was getting myself into for the first bit of it, and it just went into this really strange direction that I just wasn't the hugest fan of. But overall, I did like the book. I liked his writing quite a bit. I liked his characters. I really liked all of the characters, and I'm definitely going to be reading more by him. And I think if you're interested in that premise, you should definitely give it a shot. So the audiobook that I was going to read after 9 Fox Gambit that I pushed off to read Stranger in a Strange Land was a book called Sepharose Hand by Melissa McPhail. This one has a lot going on. It's a very long audiobook. It's like 32 hours long. And there's a lot of characters you follow. There's a lot of different threads that you follow. There's like an assassination attempt on the last living son of this king, but he's like kidnapped instead of assassinated, and then he keeps getting traded off amongst these different people. And then there's this guy that doesn't remember who he is, but he kind of gets little snippets of who he is. He kind of gets little snippets of his memory back as time goes on. He also kind of goes through this like series of events that we get to follow every bit of, and we get to follow a lot of little bits and pieces of characters, and you kind of slowly get to see them and how they relate to one another. I should be finishing this one probably tomorrow, and I am enjoying it quite a bit. I'm definitely going to be doing a full review of it, and I'll definitely talk about it also in more depth in my next weekly wrap-up when it's actually finished. Yeah, this was originally self-published and then picked up by Podium Publishing for audiobook, and is narrated by Nick Podell, and he does a fantastic job narrating it, and I very highly suggest giving it a shot. But like I said, I will talk more about it later. And the only physical book that I finished this week was Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castel. This is the first book in the Greatcoat series. I did quite enjoy this also. I think I will do a full review of this one because I have a lot to say about it. It's about the leader of this group called the Greatcoats. They used to be the magisters for the king. They used to kind of uphold the law. but the dukes have done away with the king. The dukes are corrupted, and the Greatcoats were kind of there to undermine the dukes a little bit, try to get them to be a little bit less corrupted and kind of rein them in a little bit, but they kind of rebelled against the king and took him down, and now the Greatcoats are seen as like traitors. They're kind of disgraced. They're called Tattercloaks, and no one really likes them. Everyone kind of hates them now, and this is the first-person perspective of the leader of the Greatcoats, and they're kind of dealing with the world hating them now. And it's good. It's a lot of fun, especially towards the end. The more and more I got into it, the more and more I liked it. I feel like it could have done with another pass of editing, like grammar-wise and just speaking-wise. A lot of the writing in this is kind of awkward, but the more and more you go into it, the better it gets, I feel like. And in some areas, like the dialogue, it feels like it's just kind of like the character voices, that's how they speak, and I guess it's in first-person perspective, but it just feels so awkward a lot of the times. The way things are worded just don't quite work. But yeah, I will talk more about this in a full review of it soon. I do have like several reviews coming out. I know I keep saying that, but I've been trying to get the yearly transition videos in, like the top books, my statistics, my goals and stuff like that. So I still have a couple more of those coming out, and then the reviews will be my normal programming will go back to normal, or I just post reviews like crazy all the time, and I have quite a bit to post. So you'll get a flood of reviews at some point as soon as all those videos are done with. But that was the only physical book I finished this week, because I was working on editing videos quite a bit for my vlog channel. Giselle and I have a vlog channel, if you didn't know already, and we've been behind for a while, and I finally caught up, and we're going to stay caught up now. And so I was focusing on that, and I didn't quite read as much as I would have liked to, but I did start last year. Actually, I'm almost done with this. I should be finishing this either tonight or early tomorrow. And this is about, basically, imagine that our world is just one timeline that is like a stalk of grass amongst many stalks of grass. They're all basically identical. They all basically have the same timelines, but there's this thing called the mirror that doesn't take us back into our time, but it takes us back into the timeline of a different stalk of grass that is the same timeline as ours. So it looks like our past, but it isn't necessarily our past. Going back there does not affect our future at all, and the future of this past world is not our future. So this thing called the mirror takes us back to one of these timelines, 1876 Ohio, and they kind of create the city there for the local people, the local 1876 people to come and visit, for the people of the future to go back and visit, and it's kind of a place for them to mingle, and for the people of the past to see marvels of the future and stuff like that. And we follow this one guy from the past called Jesse Cullum, and he kind of gets ensnared in this plot surrounding this contraband situation where people from the past are getting things from the future when they're not supposed to, because he ends up saving Ulysses S. Grant. Like right at the beginning, he saves Ulysses S. Grant from being shot, and it ends up being part of this bigger thing. He as a character is really compelling. I really like him as a character. He's a very honorable, kind of stoic character, and it's interesting to read from his perspective. And there's this other character named Elizabeth that he is kind of put with to be like his partner in figuring out this contraband thing. And that's only like the first bit of it, and then it kind of grows from there. And I'm really enjoying this one. I'm going to do a full review of that one as well. And then as soon as I'm done with that one, I'm going to start this. Finally, this is Book Burners by Max Gladstone. I talked about both last year and Book Burners in my last weekly wrap-up, but like I said, I kind of got caught up in other things besides physically reading books. So this one actually doesn't come out until tomorrow. It comes out on Tuesday the 10th, and I would have liked to have had the review up before then, but that's obviously not going to happen because I haven't even started it yet. It's like an 800-page book, and this is about a group of people called the Book Burners that go out and find these magical, evilly magical books. And it's a serial book in that it was created by Max Gladstone, and some of the episodes within it were written by Max Gladstone, but some of the other episodes were written by Margaret Dunlap, Mur Lafferty, and Brian Francis Slattery. And it should be really interesting to see how the episodes kind of go in and out of each other with all the different authors writing in them. This is from a website called Serial Box, so this is like season 1 of Book Burners. Right now, season 2 is on the website Serial Box, and this is like an omnibus of all of the episodes from season 1. So I'm going to read this and give it a shot. I'm really intrigued by it, and I'm definitely going to do a full review of this one as well. And if I do get through that one, I'm going to also start The Fortress at the End of Time. This is another sci-fi book that has to deal with like clones, and it's pretty short, so I'm hoping I can get to it maybe this weekend, maybe read it on Saturday or Sunday, because this does come out next week, and I would like to do a review of it when it comes out. I'm really looking forward to giving it a shot, and I'm hoping to really like it. And that's everything I plan on reading physically. And then also, after reading Sepharose Hand and finishing that, I'm going to start listening to A Warrior's Path by Davis Ashura. This was another one I mentioned in my weekly wrap-up last week, but then got pushed off because of Stranger in a Strange Land. So I'm going to be listening to that. And of course, I'll talk more about that when the time comes to talk about it. And then I'm also hoping this week to get into the next Partials book by Dan Wells. It's called Fragments, and I really liked Partials, the first one. Humans created these things called the Partials. They look exactly like humans. They act very much like humans, but they are not humans. And there's the Partials War, which basically destroyed all of humanity, and now humans can't seem to keep their babies alive. There's this thing called the Hope Act that basically makes it a requirement for girls of a certain age to get pregnant. Once you hit that age, you are obligated to get pregnant, but every time that a baby is born, the baby dies almost immediately, and they just cannot seem to save any of them, and they don't know what's going on. And the first book I really enjoyed, and I really like Dan Wells' writing, and I'm going to continue on with it. And maybe if I do finish that one, I'll also read the third one, because I have both of them checked out, and they're both due in like the next week or so. Anyway, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I would love to hear if you read any of this stuff or have any comments on anything that I talked about today. Anything you're excited about reading this week, or anything that you really loved in this past week. What have you read so far this year? What's your count at this year? Are you a Giselle and you're at 8? Are you a me and you're at 3? Or somewhere in between or less? Like, it doesn't matter. It's only the first week, but I would love to hear what you've read so far this year and what you're planning on reading this upcoming week. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you later with more.